Hey everyone, just want to run you through my Inktober 2020 drawings where I did letter forms for all of the prompts. So let's talk about materials first. I penciled everything out just using HB lead in a Berol lead holder pencil. And for ink, I used Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay Black Noir India ink. And for any whites, I did some corrections, but I also did some effects with splatters and other lines. I used Dr. P.H. Martin's pen white, which is for technical pens or airbrush, but perfectly fine for using with a brush. My ruler, so to speak, is just a basic triangle, and the paper that I used was a Strathmore mixed media vellum surface, a 6x8, 184 pound pad, 15 sheets to a pad. Probably went through 2.5 pads, given all the mistakes that you make along the way that don't get necessarily shown on camera. And the brushes, I started off using just a very cheap Plaid round 3 and noticed pretty quickly that I probably need better brushes. So I went out and I got a Princeton Elite, the number 4, which was probably a little too pointy for my taste. But I also picked up a Winsor Cotman 111 round number 4, which I definitely preferred, and I used that for probably a majority of the lettering. So let's start with prompt number 1, fish. I like to do these funky letterings where the letters kind of, not necessarily intersect, but overlap in there. Like, they have no personal space. I prefer when there is less kerning in between the lettering. It's just my personal preference. As you can see on the back, with a majority of these I did an initial sketch. Sometimes I would actually use a post-it note and kind of write out which ones I was working on and kind of some ideas of how I could go about lettering these. Next up, number 2, we have WISP. They're a little weird with how thin and wispy, so to speak, the middle is compared to the ends. Kind of wish I went with this feeling for the whole letter form. As you can see, I kind of did that here, but then changed my mind for some reason. Not really sure. You can see the waviness of some of these line edges. Very difficult to pull a nice, perfect straight line with a brush. Number 3, we have bulky. Again, showing that kind of overlapping personal space. I like when letters kind of fit in these little pieces, kind of like Tetris, where their unity makes an overall shape, and there's not a lot of space in between the lettering. It's just my personal preference. And it looks like this sketch started off a little too big for what I wanted to do, and had to start over. But all right, number 4, we have radio. Again, that closeness of the letters. I also like how there's so much overlap that 2 letters are almost stacked right on top of each other. I just think it creates some visual interest. I really enjoy the serifs on some of these letters. As you can see with this sketch, kind of similar. I didn't like the way this A was laid out, and I also didn't necessarily leave proper spacing for those serifs, so I just decided to redo it. Number 5, blade. After I did this one, this is where I realized I should start using a straight edge to lay out at least the bottom and top of the lettering to have a consistent letter height across the board, and also start using it to find my center to properly lay out my lettering. As you can see, the initial sketch was kind of very similar to the past ones, and I thought maybe I should experiment with different letter forms, which is why I went with all caps. Number 6, rodent. I really like this one. I like the thinness of it. I also like the overlap of the letters rather than just sitting in the personal space. I wish I would have committed a little more to it here with this E intersecting with the D. With it so thin here, it looks like a mistake, and I probably should have rounded it out more, but overall, happy with this one. Number 7, fancy. Just kind of funny that I didn't do a fancy letter form. Kind of basic, all lowercase. Again, using some of that overlap. I wish I could have incorporated a little more. Maybe this Y could have wrapped around some, but overall, not too bad. Definitely can see I have my own personal font, apparently, after doing a lot of these, even regardless of the serif. Like I definitely like my A's a certain way and my N's and my R's. It's just something that has kind of developed over time, apparently. All right, number 8, teeth. Using that capital lettering, not just at the beginning of the word, also the incorporation of some punctuation. Probably could have focused a little better on the E's, being that they were the same letter form back to back. And a little sloppiness in here, but overall you can tell I'm getting better. Doing these corners here and here is just very difficult to do with a brush. Like sometimes you nail it and then sometimes you don't. It's hard to be consistent. Definitely would have been way easier if I used a nib to outline the letters at least, and then I could have also used the straight edge and then come back in and fill with a brush. But that wasn't necessarily the purpose of the exercise, so in the future I would definitely do that. So number 9, we have throw. Wanted to use that serif again. I also decided because of that hard corners and edging, I thought maybe doing the serif a little rounded would help. And it did a bit, but it's still a little sloppy. Number 10, hope. This one I feel like I maybe phoned in a bit. We have some overlap and then not overlapping, which it's kind of obvious that it should be overlapping if that's the case here. Also, not too sure about this random serif. Number 11, disgusting. So this one is interesting because I really badly wanted to do a brush lettering style, which you see a lot of people doing with marker nibs very easily, where it's just that thick downstroke and thin upstroke. And it is very difficult to do with an actual brush. And as you can see in the long form video, I definitely had to cheat it, where I did all of my thicks first and then came back and went through and did all my thins. Number 12, slippery. Kind of basic. Wish I played with the lettering a little more. Maybe that juxtaposition of letters or playing with some capitals. Maybe this P could have been bigger and this one tucked underneath it. Overall, not bad. S's. Still very difficult to do. Not sure why, it's just that curviness and getting the S to look balanced and kind of a pain, but it is what it is. DUNE. So this was the first one where I decided to tape my horizontals. It is a technique that I learned doing an apprenticeship with a sign painter when I was in grade school, high school. It's basically so you can focus on pulling the straight vertical lines. You don't have to worry about the horizontal lines because trying to pull a horizontal line is very difficult. So you tape it and you pull the vertical. And depending on the letter form, you typically would tape these as well and then pull as you go. I got a little correction in here because my U turned out to be a little bit of a soggy diaper. Again, this letter form would have been way easier if I used the nib, but you know, overall, not too bad. Armor, number 14. This one, not sure why I went with that O. It definitely would have been way better if this O was more of a rounded square and matched the other letter forms. Overall, not bad. And again, use that taping method to get that nice straight edge. And number 15, we have Outpost. This was a fun one. I like the way this one turned out. Looking at it very close up, a lot of these outlines are very, very wavy, which could easily be cleaned up in the computer, especially if I was going to convert this into a vector form. Smoothing that line would be very easy. Or if it was much larger and then I was shrinking it down, that would kind of go away. But overall, very happy with this. Probably could have maybe committed to an overlap here a little more, and this T is definitely better than this one. Again, adding some punctuation. But overall, I like the layout of this one. Very happy with that one. 16, Rocket. This was a fun one. This is obviously very different from the other ones I was doing. This is the first incorporation of splattering. Also, not doing a nice, neat letter form either. Like I have these little tendrils, slash marks coming out, and then I went in and did cuts with the pen white. And then also did splattering on top of that. And this was a fun one. Definitely way more experimental, as some others after this one were. I definitely prefer doing this type of stuff. 17, Storm. Kind of went back to the script again. Not so great. I think this R gets lost. The tail on the M is probably a little thick. I do like this S though. But overall, it's kind of meh. Could have done better. Number 18, Trap. So obviously had to go with the Aqua quote, and wanted to try doing just an outline and not filling it in. Not too bad, not great, but as a first attempt, it is very difficult to pull just a single line for sure. Number 19, Dizzy. This one I really liked, and I didn't necessarily plan ahead to do these little motion lines, I guess you can call them. It just kind of came about when I started doing these end lines. And then I thought, oh, it might be cool to just kind of go with it. Thought about maybe coming in with some cuts with the white to kind of emphasize it more, but decided to leave it because I really like the way it looked. Number 20, we have Coral. Very difficult not to make a Walking Dead joke here, but overall you can kind of see I have that similar font style with my A's and R's, a little bit in the O. Sleep, number 21. This definitely has a Comic Sans feel to it for some reason. It wasn't intentional. Again, two letter forms that are the same next to each other. Should definitely concentrate on making those exact as they need to be, or they could be, unless I'm purposely making it not the same, but it is so close where the differences definitely stand out. Number 22, Chef. This was another fun one, the incorporation of an exclamation point again. I liked this juxtaposition of the capitals versus the lowercase, but also keeping that same letter height to make this overall shape kind of blocky. RIP, or RIP, I guess. This is probably one of my favorite ones. I like this jagged edge around, obviously way easier to ink with a brush than the other letters, and just overall I like the vibe of it. Very happy. Dig, number 24. Another one of my favorites. It started incorporating that splatter again. You got these little broken bits. Initially wanted it to look more dirt-like, but it turned out more rock-like, which is fine. I thought about going in and doing some cuts, like cracks that ran through the letters, but decided not to and just did the splattering instead. But overall, very happy with this one. Number 25, Buddy. Overall, not bad. This was very difficult to do, but turned out pretty good. Again, double letters next to each other that don't look exact. Could have been better with that. 26, Hide. This was an interesting one because of the capital, lowercase, but again, keeping with the same height. Pretty basic, has my definite style of ease, and a little bit of the D too. Music, number 27. A little unhappy with this one. I had this idea of incorporating a music note, and I feel like I probably could have incorporated it a little better, like maybe as the entire I as opposed to just the dot. Again, I got this kind of random serif instead of being consistent with all the letter forms. The execution could have been better overall. Number 28, Float. So this was another one, another bravery test where I decided to do the outlines and not do solid fills. Also with this one, if you look at the full video, I didn't pencil the 3D aspect of the letters. I just did the basic outline and then just came in with the brush to do all of the extra bits and the shading. Overall, happy with it. Definitely a little sloppy in areas, but for being such a thin line, trying to do that line control is very difficult, but overall happy with the way it turned out. Shoes, number 29, getting toward the end. Again, this has a Comic Sans type feel to it, but yeah, overall, not too bad. Number 30, Ominous. This is probably my favorite one. I really like the way this turned out, again, using that jagged, swishy, fluffy outline, and then coming in with the inner line. Really creates an interesting effect, and very happy with the way this turned out, and I feel the letter form actually speaks to the word itself, which is nice. And number 31, we have Crawl. Didn't necessarily go out on a high note here. I don't know, just seems sloppy compared to the other ones. The C looks a little tacked on. The sizing of these doesn't really make sense for the way it's laid out, but definitely my curves here are getting way, way better. Overall, the technique, pretty good, but the letter form itself, maybe not so good. And that concludes my run through of my Inktober 2020 letter forms. I thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.